Good morning, and thank you for joining us for our third day of plenary sessions. And I think, fortunately for all of you, my remarks this morning are incredibly brief, as I wanted to first hope that all of you had a great chance last night at the reception and the Sciences Art poster sessions, to be able to have some good one-on-one or small group conversations around all the great work that's happening in ESIP. And I wanted to ask you to join me in thanking ESRI for their support for the meeting, and in particular for the Sciences Art activity last night. And hopefully you were able to pick up a copy of Dawn's book. Did we have any left at the reception desk? Did they all run out? There are just a few left at the registration desk, so it's not too late to pick up a copy, but it's a very small number that are left. So please join me in thanking ESRI for their sponsorship. And I'd now like to invite Laura McNulty up from ESRI to share a few words with us.
Good morning. I'm Laura McNulty. I manage ESRI's National Government Sciences team. And on behalf of the team that's here from ESRI, Hung Wu and Kevin Butler, Sudhir is holed away working on his presentation, is what he tells me. But I wanted to say thank you both to Carl and Aaron and the entire ESIP team for hosting a great conference this week. It's always ESRI's pleasure and privilege to sponsor an ESIP summer meeting, or the ESIP summer meeting. And this year is especially special for us for a couple of reasons. One, last year I remember toasting ESIP's 20th birthday. And this year it's ESRI's 50th anniversary. So big milestone for us. Pardon me. But also because of the theme, data to action, which is very near and dear to our heart. So ESRI produces a comprehensive platform that allows our customers to collect data, to analyze and understand it, and then to put it into action to solve critical business problems. And like ESIP, we know it's important. We know community is important, and we take feedback from conferences like this, from our customers, and then roll that feedback back into our product development direction. And so we welcome your feedback. Please, we are very pleased about the strides we've been able to make in adding critical capabilities to bring to support science and the science process and scientists themselves. So please continue to provide us that feedback. And just one last thought, Jack Dangerman, who is both our founder and our president, has instilled in every ESRI employee that it's ESRI's responsibility to make a difference in the world. And based on the sessions that I've attended, the people that I've met here, I feel like that passion is very similar in this room. And so again, I thank you for your contributions. I thank you for the work you do. And it gives me pleasure now to introduce Annie Burgess, who is the director of the ESIP lab, who's going to kick off this third plenary session. So thank you very much for your support.
I brought my coffee. I'm like, I can make hot coffee during this. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Annie Burgess, and for those who I haven't met, it's lovely to see you this morning. I'm excited to give you a brief introduction to the ESIP Lab, which is a program within ESIP. You may have heard it mentioned a couple times this week, but I'm going to give most of my time this morning to the projects that we have supported over this past year, and then to two exemplary plenary speakers that will start at about 9 a.m. So with that, just a bit about our kind of mission and vision within the lab to support the development of visionary earth science technology through funding, strategic outreach and community input, but much more broadly, all of this needs to have impact. And so we like to be a multiplier and advocate for individuals and ideas that advance our knowledge of Earth system science. So this is all in this idea of how can the lab, and why kind of the lab was founded within ESIP, is we felt that we need more of a catalyst for some applied projects to kind of get us towards that vision that we have. So through the lab, we are able to support and build cross-disciplinary teams to experiment with technology. Kind of have this notion, and a lot of people have said it throughout the week, that imagine if you could have an end user at that prototype stage of technology development that's letting you hear what would be useful to them. We had a project a couple years ago that they were developing a portal to look at some imagery, and eventually an end user came and said, a timestamp, just a simple timestamp in the upper window would make the difference between me using and not using this, because that's a critical component. And so just having that input at the prototype stage was an example of just kind of user-driven development that we're able to support. Also, that these projects receive early and often feedback from this community. So you'll hear from some of them today, and at every meeting, the projects that we support through the lab are able to come to ESIP meetings and present to this community of earth science data technologists that, again, at this very early prototype stage, are able to give them feedback and insights and hopefully create more robust technology down the line. Another thing the lab has enabled us to do is to engage in some interesting public-private partnerships that we didn't have in reach to previously within ESIP, and it's been exciting to watch that evolve. So broadly, how does this look? In terms of what we call our incubator projects, twice a year we give out about $10,000 to 5 to 6 projects at a time. We also provide cloud credits generously through AWS, their Research Cloud Credits program. Again, projects receive community input. I also do a lot of strategic outreach on behalf of these projects, and I'll show an example of that in a bit. But it's not kind of a small bucket of money and saying go ahead. It's really listening to the people that we support, asking who else should know about their projects. Could we bring another COI onto your project that would give a big lift and value add? And then after that 6-month initial development period, what's the next step? And really trying to shepherd people through that process to, again, bring increased value to their project down the line. And then I like to also point out this kind of organizational support bit. At the base of all of this, you have this ESIP community that these projects can lean back on. So that kind of can't be understated, that we actually have the benefit of having a staff and being able to give some real support to these projects down the line. So I'm just going to give a brief example of what this looks like. So in a bit, you'll hear from Jensen's son, who's sitting up here. He was funded about a year ago after proposing a project he called GeoWeaver. So this is June 2018. He gets about $7,000 to prototype this project, and he's going to tell you more about it. But it was a simple, I'm a machine learning expert. I have this challenge. I want to build a tool to solve my problem, and I'm going to guess that if it's a problem for me, it's probably a problem for other people. So we gave him a small bit of funding. Then ESIP holds a workshop in conjunction with the Science Gateways Community Institute through NSF. We brought him along for that. That gives projects tools related to funding sustainability, diversifying the funding model, how to talk about your project, etc. The little people down the line are saying, we're continuing to talk. Jensen and I are having a lot of conversations. And then me being someone that likes science challenges, I saw that NGA was hosting a challenge related to using deep learning to look at agricultural fields. And this is what Jensen is an expert on related to deep learning. So I said, hey, you should apply. You've just built this great tool that is using deep learning and this really interesting method, and he ends up being one of the prize winners for this NGA challenge, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. So again, that $7,000 already we're leveraging, and now NGA is excited about this project. Jensen comes, he presents at the ESIP winter meeting. We continue to chat, and then you see a bunch of NSF logos down the line. But we did a first try at NSF at April 2019. We didn't get that proposal. Just yesterday, Jensen submitted a career proposal through NSF. He's, again, presenting today. And then just in the last couple months, Another program, another project that's been sponsored through the ESIP Lab is working with Jensen, and that's going to be a joint proposal with 2 ESIP Lab funded projects, and you'll hear a little bit about that project that's out of UW, but they're using machine learning to look at snow cover data, and we'll integrate the GeoWeaver project into that. And so here we are today. And so hopefully this just gives you a bit of a notion about the kind of timeline and support and way that we like to shepherd projects along within the lab. So again, we do this through putting out 2 requests for proposals a year. You have to have 1 member on your team that's part of an ESIP member institution. So you could have non-ESIP member institutions be part of labs. If you're a federal employee and you can't receive funding, this is a great opportunity to partner with your university colleagues to receive funding. We also participate in our mentoring organization for the Google Summer of Code project, which I won't go into a whole bunch. You'll hear from Rich Signell in a bit about his Google Summer of Code project. I wanted to mention that the other project that we're supporting through Google Summer of Code, they couldn't be there today, but it's using deep neural networks to classify orcas using acoustic data. And I was just at a NOAA Emerging Technology Workshop, and someone on Google's team was there presenting similar work he had done, and now those folks are talking. So it's really exciting to see those kind of synergies happen. So with that, I would encourage everyone to join in if you're interested in anything you've heard, to find me in chat. I also wanted to give a shout out to the humble mountain goat, which I personally love to see when I'm hiking the Pacific Northwest, and our sticker mascot for the week, which we've deemed Millie. I like mountain goats because they're nimble, and they're also kind of like, we're dependent on them for their example of agility, but they are certainly dependent on us as they require high mountain meadows to graze, and the snowpack changes and changes in phenology are certainly impacting their environments just not far from here and around the Intermountain West. So just a friendly reminder to think of our furry friends. Okay, so that's the lab. A couple announcements. Tonight is Funding Friday poster drawing night. For those of you who are first timers, just a bit about this. We're going to head over to Seven Seas Brewery after today's events. You'll get a sheet of poster. Hopefully you've been chatting to people this week, and you can draw an idea out. Tomorrow morning, on Friday morning, people will present that idea, and the audience will vote on who should get some cash. So it's a $5,000 award for members, a $3,000 award for students. Talk to other ESIPers about how they've used their Funding Friday projects, or if they've presented. It's a really fun event, and it's another kind of way that this just isn't the typical meeting that we really like to get people together and create on the fly. So again, if you have any questions about that, let me know. And lastly, this afternoon is our unconference. This is a chance to chat about things if you haven't had a session and people have been mulling about during the week and would like to chat further. Put a post-it on the board near the registration desk. Please do that this morning during break or sessions, because we're going to schedule those and put them into rooms at lunchtime. It's a great time to just continue the conversation with colleagues. It could be 3 of you chatting, or it could be a large room. So again, I just encourage you all to dive in there. So if you're really hoping, like this goat is, that our next speakers are Jensen, Abdullah, Eric, Amanda, Rich, James, and Kelsey, then you're in the right place. So with that, I'd like to bring Jensen up. And again, he's presented on this before. This is our GeoWeaver update, where this project is. I'm going to give one shout out to the artwork that you're going to see. I don't know let's see if there's any glaciologists in the room, but Maury Pelto is a glaciologist, and his daughter Jill Pelto does these fabulous watercolor drawings that integrate kind of climate change and actual data, and I just think they're incredibly beautiful. So I have credit to her on the bottom, and in case you don't see that, please look up Jill Pelto. She's a fabulous artist and top-notch scientist. So, Jensen?
Thank you, Andy. Cannot talk too fast. Okay. So GeoWeaver is ESIP Lab funded project, and I really appreciate that the ESIP Lab give this idea a chance to prototype first, and then we write some proposal, and then hopefully it can be funded. Okay, so the first idea is derived from my experience in deep learning, because most of the time is wasted on the repeated tedious processes in the deep learning. So the first thing in deep learning case is that most scientists just reuse the neural network developed by other scientists, and then most time is spent on the pre-processing and post-processing, which is involved a lot of resources. Like I'm working on 5 servers every day at the same time. So it's a lot of work to manage them, and it's really hard to remember what I have done. So the challenge here is how to manage the full stack deep learning workflows, not only the deep learning part, but also the pre-processing and the post-processing. And the second of them is how to harness the code, data, and the computing platforms in one place. So I don't want to open 5 windows every day on my laptop and see which one does it, and that was saying at that time. So I want to manage them all in one place. And then the last one is how to record provenance, which is phrases in deep learning. So I created this tool for myself, but I believe that a lot of people will benefit from it. So this tool is a workflow system which can manage your host, no matter where it is, like Amazon instance, Amazon workspace machines, or your university-owned servers, or your own laptops. It can manage them all for you. The second thing is that it can allow you to input all your Python, Jupyter Notebook, shell scripts, and manage them in one place. So you don't have to put them in your servers and then go them to find them to say, okay, I want to execute this project and running this command. So it's like all fully managed code system, and then it can link them into a workflow which can run on different platforms. So it's an open source project available on the ESIP GitHub repository, so everybody can download it and install it on anywhere you want. So it's like your laptop or servers both are fine. So GeoWeaver is a unique solution right now, based on my knowledge that it's a unique workflow system which can do hybrid workflow. So it can manage all the multiple distributed servers, no matter it's public in the public resources or the private resources. It maintains all the servers as usual, as they are. Like my data, part of them are on Amazon, part of them are in our university-owned servers. I can access them all in GeoWeaver and one place. The second thing is it allows for accessibility files on different servers or virtual machines or any platforms. So it provides the web-based SSH and file uploader. You can upload files to your servers, and then file browser, which you can download your files anywhere, anytime. So it's like an alternative to SSH and FTP or VPN at the same time. And the third feature is it gives you a hidden data flow, which is actually everyone is using the hidden data flow every day, because the data flow is underlying, is embedded in the code, which is not because the current workflow system is like you have to specify the input and the output out of the box of the processes. But in GeoWeaver, we believe that simple is beauty. So we just simplify the process into one process. So you don't have to care about the data flow. And the third and fourth feature is we separate the code from the machine. So the code is fully managed in a database. No matter which machine you want to run the code, it's fine. Just save the code in the GeoWeaver, and you can run it dynamically on different servers. So code is separated from machine. And the fifth feature of GeoWeaver is like the process-oriented provenance. So every time I made changes to my code, it's like I forget what I have made because I change code hundreds of times a day. So eventually I forget why the result is like this, why the code is like this. So every execution, GeoWeaver will record every execution by recording its input code and the output logs. So you are mapping the code with the result. So there is no excuse to say that okay, so this workflow is not reproducible because we do not have provenance. So everything is recorded in GeoWeaver. So I'm like agriculture remote sensing scientist, so I use GeoWeaver in my research, and you can see the result here. It's the left is deep learning result, the right one is USDA map, so it's very similar, and the result is has very high accuracy, and the GeoWeaver saved like at least half of my time, so it's a very useful tool for me, and I think a lot of people will benefit from it. So thank you.
Just to note, we'll take questions for all of our lab presenters at the end. So Abdullah?
Good morning, everybody. This is presenting to you fair tool. The goal of creating this tool is to create RDF format file for the metadata of the earth science community. And it is according to fair guiding principle. You need several things to build this tool, understanding the ontology engineering, and also understanding the semantic programming and development, JavaScripting, API integration, the SQL query, and also MySQL, Fitro, and Tomcat. The challenges that we face for this project is struggling putting everything working together. The database crashes several times and rebuilding the system again and again. Ontology does not work, and we have to go and rebuild the ontology again. The approaches to solve those challenges involve in data science and semantic web courses, and involve in online courses and tutorials about Protege and CMAP and GS and API and Sparkle and Fitro and MySQL and Tomcat and Maven. Also, I took advice from and consultation from my advisor, Dr. Marshall Mapp. The result and progress, this diagram shows the vocabulary of the FAIR ontology. And this is like an integration between several well-known vocabulary like DCAT and Void, Prof, FOF, and SOC, and schema.org, ODRL, and CompuNet. This table shows the projection of and association of the classes and properties of the according to the principles and the mapping each principle of each property and classes used there. And this is the screenshots of the system. It's like a familiar interface. This is the software that Vivo was built on. The form is to allow you to enter the dataset and the metadata in the dataset. And then you have all the data will be showing here, and you have the opportunity to download the RDF file through the small link here. And also you have the free text search there because it is based on Solar search. Also a couple of screenshots about entering the file in the dataset itself and the catalog in the dataset and its detailed metadata. And we are planning to fetch the data from the triple stores and present it on its designated places here. And also planning to put some scoring system for each principal. The lesson learned from this project, do not think everything will work from the first 10 times. So keep trying. Whatever you do, things will not be final. Always there are more. And be patient and retry until you lose hope. Once you lose hope, it will work. And finally, if you really want things to be done, it will be. Conclusion, and future work, the fairtool.org needs some time to be ready for public. Beta version is ready in my laptop. If anybody wants to try it and has a data set and want to try it. The future work, we are debating of implementing the fair scoring system, evaluating the rating on the schema.org, and also evaluating the Hudson's 5-star scales on the fair principle. Thank you, and this is the end.
Once you lose hope, it'll work. All right, with that, I'll invite Eric Sproles up and
Hello and good morning. So the Earth's albedo changes across time and space, and you see these changes as it happens across the seasons have a really strong influence on water and energy cycles across our Earth. Now these Earth observations are primarily made from space, and even though you see those changes at strong changes at the global scale, if you look at more local scales, you also see these same changes. Here we're looking at the just to our east off the flank of Mount Rainier, and you can see really some pretty strong variability just within one snapshot of albedo on a single day. And these Earth observations from space, they're all validated and calibrated based upon one, or I should say, stations, fixed stations across the Earth, primarily in the northern hemisphere. So these stations are incredibly valuable, and they help inform these Earth observations. These individual stations inform the satellites, to validate and calibrate the instruments. The problem is that this station is one point, it's one fixed location in a very that has to capture and represent a lot of variability across the landscape, especially in mountainous terrain. And that kind of overarching thought, that our overarching question, is what led to my ESIP lab proposal. Is basically, can we figure out a better way to bridge this gap between point-based observations on the surface of the Earth and satellite observations from space? And can we do this using UAVs or drones, specifically in mountainous terrain where access is very hard and you also have a lot of variability that exists across that landscape? So I'd like to here acknowledge my co-authors on this paper, specifically Andrew Mullen, who was an undergraduate student at Montana State University that I was able to hire as part of this project, and he's in field camp this week, so he wasn't able to come, but has a really big footprint on this project. Yes, this is where we get to work. It's very nice. So to measure albedo, we used two separate instruments. We used a radiometer. So radiometer simply measures broadband albedo, basically at this spectral wavelength going from about 1,000 to 2,500 nanometers. Again, this is just into the near infrared, just past the visible wavelengths. So albedo is the calculations of albedo is a ratio of the incoming solar radiation as composed to the reflected solar radiation. So in order to capture the broadband albedo, we needed to mount 2 of these sensors. And so previous efforts had mounted one sensor on a drone or UAV to fly over landscape, and their incoming measurement was fixed to a pole or a tower. So by doing that, while it was in advance, they were not able to capture the albedo across a landscape, especially in mountainous terrain. So we designed a prototype system based on these Kip and Zonin sensors, where we have an upward-facing radiometer and also a downward-facing radiometer that are mounted onto the drone. This is Andrew. This is our first field experiment. First day in the field, we had perfect conditions for flying a drone. You can tell. And so one of the biggest questions we wanted within the proposal was, will this work? Can we actually do this? And will it actually give us data that works before we go too far down the line? So this is our first flight. Again, we're flying a pretty expensive drone and some pretty expensive sensors into a snowstorm. So we were a little nervous, but you can see the drone, it takes off. It works pretty well, even in really, really poor conditions. The project, it was quite nice. And I was very relieved when it didn't crash. So all of our efforts, we've encapsulated onto a website. This website will be, these slides will be made public. But all of the information, how we went through this, will be on there. Also, the mounts here this is really important. Instead of just ad hoc attaching these expensive sensors to an expensive drone, we went through the process of designing and fabricating mounts and printing them with a 3D printer to make sure everything was securely fastened. This project has been quite successful. We got to capture the eye of our press department at Montana State, and Andrew got a really nice piece written up about him for the university, which is pretty nice for an undergraduate to get. It also caught the eye of the USGS, and one thing Annie has really talked about is using these ESIP lab projects to springboard moving forward, and we submitted a proposal to the USGS for an innovation grant, which we received. So this will fund Andrew to come back to grad school and complete this project. So we're very excited about that. So far I've been pretty light. This is the first results from our first flight that we showed the video for. And you can see the question was, can we get this to work? And the answer is yes. So here you see albedo. This is in a 3-dimensional perspective. The grids on the ground are Landsat grid cells. So you can see how we were able to capture and measure albedo moving across the landscape. So these are my results, and they're so far that I'm presenting in this presentation. And it might seem a little light, but that does allow me to introduce my friend Shameless Plug here. And so Shameless Plug would like to let you guys know that we'll be presenting more about the in-depth scientific results and the 10:30 session, and we'll go more in depth under the hood of the science and how we got everything to work and what didn't work. With that, I would like to thank Annie especially for funding this project, Kip and Zonin for their help, and Yellowstone Club and their ski patrol for allowing us access on the project. Thank you.
Working at the Yellowstone Club has got to be a real burden for a scientist. So we thank you for doing that heavy lift to get over there. And as a snow hydrologist, it's really exciting to see snow pictures, which is really why we get another snow talk. Oh, there's Amanda right there. So next I'll have Amanda Tan come up and talk about CubeSats and snow more.
Morning, everyone. So with my colleagues Nicoletta Castilla and a very, very talented grad student, Tony Canistra, we have been very privileged to work with ESIP on trying to infer snow-covered areas from CubeSat imagery. So the background for this project actually came out of trying to understand flowering phenology in Mount Rainier. A lot of times trying to build that relationship that you see down in the bottom a little relationship chart down at the bottom, involves very painstaking observations. And so the question became like, how can we actually streamline this process? What are the kinds of options do we have in developing this relationship, not only within areas like Mount Rainier, but moving down to areas like California and the Sierra Nevada? The question is, how does snow disappearance actually affect plant phenology, which is trying to understand when flowering happens in the mountains. The thought is, well, we need high resolution at meter scale snow cover area masks. So previously, all the imagery that we had looked at have been on the spectrum of things like MODIS, where you have coarse resolution, but high temporal resolution. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have Landsat, which is very fine resolution, but at a rather coarse resolution. So can we find something else that kind of bridges that gap? And we looked at CubeSat imagery. So for Planet Labs, that's imagery that's very high resolution at a near daily cadence. But the problem with Planet Labs data is that it didn't have the bands that we needed to derive these snow-covered area masks. So then we asked the question of whether or not we can use machine learning to derive the snow masks. So our approach was pretty simple. We got some LiDAR, some observation data from the NASA ASO repository, and we tried to figure out if we can actually derive a snow mask using the planet data. So if you see in this image right here, we have observation data denoted as ASO, and we derived a snow mask. So can we emulate that with the planet data? So our methodology was really to use a convolutional neural network. The convolution neural network that we used pipeline was built from something called RoboSat, which I'm not going to get too much into. And this is basically the methodology where we use the convolutional neural network to derive the probability of snow cover. And over here, what we do is first, again, derive the snow cover from the ASO data, and then derive the snow cover from the planet data, and then try to compare and see how much it matches. And I want to talk a little bit about our workflow architecture. We first downloaded a bunch of the ASO data into an Amazon S3 bucket, and then we converted them into raster files using the Pangeo infrastructure, which is basically just a Jupyter hub that has parallel computing in the backend to process all these raw files into cloud-optimized geotiffs that then gets dumped back into an Amazon S3 bucket. And then we perform machine learning training using this RoboSat package pipeline that I talked about earlier. And then we used a bunch of GPUs on Amazon to actually do that. And all this code is available on GitHub, on Tony Canistra's GitHub repository. So here are some preliminary results. So first we look at how well this whole setup actually works when it comes to snow versus no snow. This is an area in California in the upper Tuolumne River Basin. And we can see that in the middle we have the actual observations. This is the LiDAR-derived snow mask. And then on the left, we have the convolutional neural network prediction from the planet tiles. And we can see that it's actually a really good match. But how about throwing some forests into the mix? And we look at snow versus trees, and we can see that while we can actually get the outlines for the snow-covered areas, it doesn't do very well. The neural network actually doesn't do very well when there's trees, which is denoted by these areas in green. Part of the problem is that we're not able to capture the snow that falls under the canopy layers. And then also looking at, well, how well does the neural network actually work when there's water reflective surfaces? And you can see from the convolutional neural network predictions that we actually can mask out areas that are the lakes. If you see on the planet on the far right, there's this little gray area right there. That's actually a lake, and in the neural network prediction, that actually doesn't show up in the snow-covered mask. But see again with the areas in green that it actually can differentiate between the snow and the forest canopy. So what are the next steps for us is to actually train separately the network for forested versus open areas, and then to specifically analyze the performance on slope terrains, and just to play around with reducing or increasing the number of bands to one visible or one near infrared, and then also to try to look at different processing pipelines, like trying to use Amazon SageMaker and how well that would compare to using something like RoboSat. And then in the moving further on, like out into the future, we want to extend this analysis to other sites that actually have LiDAR data. And then also to look at regional and continental scales. And I just wanted to also say that this ESIP funding has been really great in helping us to make this as a prototype, and we are working on actually putting in an NS proposal with Annie and Jensen on expanding this further.
Thanks so much, Amanda. All right, and our last lab/Google Summer of Code project report out is from Rich Signell.
Okay, so first up, CondaForge. CondaForge came on the scene a couple of years ago and really, I think, transformed for a lot of people how they actually get their software installations working. Prior to this, you had, you could use this Conda package manager to install complex software, but many of the packages that were out in the community were not, of course, maintained by Anaconda, who was only maintaining their sort of core suite of packages. So CondaForge came along and it allowed anyone who has a package to basically automate the whole workflow of once they change their code, they can automatically have it built for all the different platforms that they need it built for and all the different versions of Python. So, you kick this thing off and it creates all these binaries for all these different platforms, Mac and Windows, Linux, and all different versions of Python, and uploads those all to anaconda.org. So if you're a user out in the community and you want to build your software environment, you have an environment file and it pulls all these packages and magically creates your environment that you need to run whatever custom build book like somebody may have given you, for example. So it's a very powerful tool, and it became a little bit a victim of its own success. This is the amount of packages downloaded per month in millions. Okay, so starting off in early 2018, we're now up to 40 million package downloads per month. And if you notice, the green line is non-Python packages. A lot of people think this is just a Python thing, but a lot of the really complex packages out there, like GDAL and NCO and other tools that we use in the geospatial community, are super difficult to build. And here you can just go conda install NCO, whatever platform you're on, and it just works. It's amazing. So please check that out if you're unaware that you can install things other than Python. So this is what the dependency graph looks like. There's 7,200 packages, 50,000 dependency relationships, 1,000 maintainers, and 40,000 pull requests. You can imagine that is difficult for humans to work with. So the packages in the middle of this picture are like the core packages, like NumPy in Python. And as you go out on this graph, these packages depend on more and more packages. The packages out at the edge, nothing depends on them, but they depend on all this other stuff. So when one of these things updates, you have a package, upstream that updates. How do you notify the people downstream that something has happened? So ESIP came along and provided funding to build this bot that actually handles that for them. And so basically, the bot will notify by pull requests all the package maintainers, so that somebody had to, in the old days, people would say, okay, something updated, you'd send a message to somebody, hey, this updated. It was not scalable. So that was a huge, big thing that changed that ESIP made possible. So they built this bot and it works. And the other thing that was that there was all the packages on CondaForge had some conflicts with the packages that were being distributed by Anaconda, and ESIP made it possible for those developers to get together. They had a face-to-face meeting, and they worked out the differences, and now the packages are much more seamless. So, and then the third thing was that the continuous integration actually has been moved to a much more robust continuous integration framework on Microsoft channels. So all three of those things have had a huge impact on actually the sanity of the CondaForge maintainers, but also just on the reliability of everything. So this is just one example of how this works. Here's this AstroPy package, and they get then the bot submits this little message, and it's very likely that the current package version of this feedstock is out of date, and that came from the bot. So the benefits of this, obviously, this had to be more automated. And what it allows is that many more packages to be supported. That graph's just going to keep going up. Much more reliability over the whole system. And ultimately, this leads to just more usage of all these packages, more reproducible environments in the whole ESIP community, and ultimately more data put into action. So now I'm going to talk about our Google Summer of Code, which has been super exciting. Annie, how many proposals were there for the 17 or something? So out of 17 proposals, only 2 went forward from that Google sponsored. And one of them was this, Annie mentioned the other one, and this one is a next generation GUI for visualizing big gridded data in Python. And the student is Harmandeep Singh, who's over in India, and myself and Mark Durant from Anaconda are the mentors. So I have to thank Annie for, originally I was just going to be the mentor for this, and I was like, oh yeah, it'd be cool if you built this thing, and this is kind of what I'd like it to look like. This would be really valuable for the community, and but I'm not a software developer, so Annie said, well, why don't you get like an actual software developer involved with this? So we got Martin Durant from Anaconda, and he has been unbelievable at just, sure, we're going to get this tool built, but along the way, he's just showing the student how to do all these things properly. And for instance, one of the first things we did was, hey, let's just start this thing out right in a community, GitHub repo that's already going to, we know this is going to be here this year, next year, and going forward. And this is the intake catalog. It's the intake repo that is a cataloging system for Python. So here it is, XRViz, and he also said, hey, let's step back, and instead of building this model viewer thing that you want, Rich, why don't we build something that can fundamentally just visualize any X-array object, so any gridded object. And then on top of that, we can build your model viewer. So, he's been doing things really properly, submitting, pull requests. There's tons of discussion on these pull requests. So some of the pull requests that have been merged. You can see over on the right how much discussion there's been on the projection panel. We had 121 items in the discussion list. It's been very, very active, and he's keeping track of everything. You can go look at his. He's sort of building his final report as he goes. And what time is up? Wait, is the time up for the first one, or the 14 minutes is up? Yeah, this is the second one, sorry. Okay. Oh, phew. It's like, wow. Okay. So he's reporting, he's building his final report as he goes. So you can keep track. It's almost like a little blog post, although he is also blogging on Medium, which is great because he's getting a lot of feedback. And here's us yesterday, me sitting in the hotel in the Holiday Inn Express. We have our little weekly meetups, and there's Martin Durant down there. And these are great, 1 hour every week, and where we work out the stuff that we, that's easier to work out face to face. So many people recommend not doing a live demo, so let's do a live demo. All right, so let's see here. I'm gonna pop out of there. I think. Okay, actually, you know what? I want to start from the very beginning because actually, if any of you have a notebook open, a laptop, you can go ahead and do the same thing. You can follow along and run it yourself. So it's already out there, let's see. So I'm going to start off by searching for reproducible notebooks. Not that. So we're going to go to GitHub. And here's a demonstration of using this that's hooked up to Binder. So we've got some different, actually there's other repos here you might want to check out too, but this one, we're going to explore the Kerr model with XRViz, okay? So he checked this in 11 hours ago. Thank you, Normandy. And at the bottom here, there is a link to launch on Binder. So what's happening now is from the environment file that's in there, it builds a Docker container and then launches that container on the Pangeo Amazon Binder. So it's going to come up here in a few seconds, hopefully, if unless somebody changed something in the repo. All right. While that's loading, I can go over here. So if somebody's changed something in the repo, it has to rebuild the whole container. So otherwise, it just launches the container and it comes up pretty quickly. It actually did come up. Yeah. So I should have warned people not to change the source code before this. But anyway, so it might take a few minutes to come up. We'll see if we get there. This is this dashboard. Let's see, is this going to run? Now we can retreat back to the. Let's see if this will run. So this is an old. I think this is an old Binder, so it probably won't run because it probably still don't have access to this. But it is running. Okay, good. Okay, so basically at the top here, I'm just connecting to Unidata's Jetstream server, which Julian Chastain mentioned yesterday, that is not their cloud version of their thread server Unidata, which provides access to all the latest weather forecast data and much more. So you can actually get to the real model output, right? And so here, we open up the data set and I'm providing some initial parameters so I don't have to click all the stuff in the GUI. So that's kind of cool, right? So you can programmatically control everything in the GUI. And then here, we've selected the temperature variable, and there's some information about that variable here. Let's just go down though, and actually, you know what, let's get rid of some of this junk here. Better. Oh, whoops, I already did that. Go to full screen. Okay, we got a little more real estate here. Let's see what's going on. Okay, so we're gonna click this plot button. When I click the plot button, it should go out to that OpenDAP server, grab the weather data. So it'll whenever you execute this, it'll grab the latest weather data, and then it puts it up on a plot down here on a latitude longitude plot with some base map behind it. And you can pick the variable, you can pick the time. If you hover over, you can see the value. So we pick temperature above ground, but let's choose let's say wind speed. So just to show that this is live, obviously that I didn't already. Well, you saw that it was live, but so now we're going to change to wind speed. It takes a little bit to download the data, and then it takes a little bit to render this image. But actually, coming soon is I think a 40x speed up or something in the plot in the thing that actually makes the plot here. So this should. Click that. Oh, yeah. So there's the wind speed. We can and then we can zoom in over here with these tools. Actually, Jim Bednar is going to tell you all about this in much more detail. Mac. Okay, I don't know how to zoom in on Mac. Oh, there we go. Okay, so I can zoom in and select different time steps. Then up here, he's got all sorts of other functionality. Anyway, show. So he's got these other tabs up here, which would allow you to do all sorts of plot things in all different ways with different coordinates. You can do like animations. You can choose different styles, color maps. Choose different size for your plot. You can choose different base maps, different projections. And he's got a month left to go. So it's already a super useful tool. So jump back to just the last slide here. Oh, okay. I meant my backup slides. Okay. So so our final slide. You know, so this project, it's really been interesting. I feel like it's like, you know, those essays that people write to college where they go off and do some humanitarian thing and then they're like, oh, but you know, I thought I was going to help them and I end up helping myself or something. It's just like, I feel like, you know, this is going to bring visualization functionality to this community, and that's going to be a super cool tool that people are going to use. But it's also these other things like bringing this new talent. Like, he didn't know anything about this whole field, right? He's a computer science guy. Now he's kind of jazzed about this whole geoscience thing. And, you know, he may end up in our field, which would be super cool. And it's been really cool just to see him learning it. He's just so eager to learn all this stuff. And, you know, he's like working on the weekends. He's working all the time. It's really cool. And then the last bit is about just being there with Martin Duran. I feel like I'm seeing like how to be a good mentor just by, you know, watching what Martin does, and actually Google Summer of Code provides a lot of resources for mentors to help them be better mentors. So anyway, it's been a fantastic project, and it's going to keep on going, and it's going to build off of that and just keep on going after this project is done. So thank you.
What time is it? 8:57. Okay, great. So thanks to all of our fantastic speakers, and I hope that has given you a bit of food for thought on kind of how things operate within the lab, and just mostly that there are really talented people within our field, and I'm so happy that we were able to highlight them today. We do have few minutes for questions for anyone, including myself. So if anyone does have a question, feel free to jump up to one of the mics. If no one has questions for our speakers, I hope you find them after the session and it breaks, and chat them up about their projects. So with that, I've got to get my intro. Jim, you're going to be up. Rich up here on a Mac with a live demo was always a treat in the morning. So thanks for that, Rich. So I'm pleased to bring up Dr. James Bednar next. James is currently the manager of technical services at Anaconda and the lead on a variety of open source packages under the PyViz banner, including HoloViews, GeoViews, HViewPlot, Data Shader, amongst others. Jim is also the technical lead for several geoscience-focused projects with NASA Goddard, including EarthML and the Army Corps of Engineers, their EarthSim project, and PanGeo and other clients. Jim has a PhD in computer science from the University of Texas, along with degrees in electrical engineering and philosophy. Prior to Anaconda, for about 12 years, he was a faculty member in the School of Informatics at the University of Edinburgh, and I am excited to have Jim come on up. All right.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation. It's a very exciting opportunity for me to see a whole bunch of people who are potential users of our tools and understand their needs, and discuss with everyone. So if anyone sees me after this talk today and wonders whether our tools will work for your case, please just grab me and chat me up. So I'm speaking for a whole team of people at Anaconda. Their names are listed there. One of the names might be familiar, Julia Signell. She actually joined my group from another part of Anaconda, so she didn't go through an interview process with me. She just, we had restructuring. It turns out she was useful for some of the things we were doing, And it was only after she was in my group for quite some time that I asked, hey, do you know that guy Rich? And it turned out she did. So it was entirely coincidental. I was involved with Rich through Pangeo, and his daughter joined our group. And eventually I figured out that all made sense. It was not through him. So like Andy said, we have, I'm actually from a neuroscience background originally, neuroscience and computer science, but we had a project with the UK Met Office a few years ago. That resulted in, basically we had a package called HoloViews. The Met Office paid us to create GeoViews, and then that got attention to various other people, and now we do more geospatial stuff than just about anything. So it's lots of happenstance that led to me being here today. So as you probably know, Anaconda works on Python. And if you're in Python and you want to visualize something, you're immediately faced with something like this, which is a plethora of choices. But that's also bad news, because if you're just a researcher trying to get things done, suddenly you have a task rather than getting to work on your own tasks of trying to figure out what tool to use, which one's good for what you particularly want to do, and so on. And so nobody in the Python community has used all these tools. Well, there are some people who have tried every tool. Nobody actually uses and is an expert on them. No single tool solves everything you need to do, and the tools generally don't work together. So that's kind of bad news for using Python for getting research done. So at Anaconda, we've done two things to try to help this. Now, first off, why would we do this? These are all open source tools. We make no money off of anything. Why do we do these things? Well, Anaconda happens to sell a commercial product, and that commercial product is only valuable if people can use Python to get their work done. Basically, the commercial product allows them to install Python and packages in it behind a firewall for their corporate use or agency use. So that commercial product is only valuable to the extent that the Python ecosystem is healthy. So everything I'm going to talk about is entirely open source, but it's kind of in Anaconda's interest that the open source works well. So the first thing we did, we started a project called PyViz. The first thing I'll talk about, we've actually been working for about 5 years on this. The first thing I'll talk about is PyViz. PyViz is, just go to pyviz.org. If you have any questions about what does Python offer for anything to do with visualization, it'll answer it. And PyViz is an extremely general, open, every package should be listed there. PyViz does not tell you which one to use. It only gives you information. So this is an open community focused site. The other thing we're doing is now called HoloViz. These used to be all called PyViz. We've decided to separate them into everything and the things that we really say you should use. So HoloViz is an opinionated set of tools. These are the ones we actually maintain and that we work hard on to solve problems, particularly in the geosciences. And in HoloViz, we don't try to account for everything on that diagram. We pick and choose to say that these set of tools together will solve a very wide range of problems. And there are other tools on this in the landscape that are useful. We haven't gotten to those, or maybe they're just not relevant once you've chosen these other tools. So HoloViz is the name of our group. It's also the name of this particular set of packages up there, and I'll go through those in a bit. What Rich was showing you with XRViz, that's based on Intake, Xarray, and a whole bunch of HoloViz tools, including those up here. So why are these tools relevant to you guys? Well, perhaps the most important reason is that this is all browser-based visualization tools. This is not on a desktop, this is in a browser, and that's important because if you're using very large data sets that are remote somewhere, you need to do the computation at the remote site in the cloud or on an HPC system or some other thing that's not your laptop. You also need to do the visualization there. You need to look at it locally, but the data is remote. So you have to have something that handles that. Most Python Viz tools do not. Many do. We're only going to focus on the ones that do. Because otherwise, it's not something you can scale up. These tools also, which is what kind of got us started on a lot of these projects, these were the only ones to support, of the browser-based visualization tools, they're the ones that support server-side rendering of huge data sets. What does that mean? Well, it means that the data never goes down to your local machine. It stays on the server, you render something, a picture of it goes down to your local machine if it's very large data. So you can work with something enormous, and it works fine locally, even though you're far from the data. Rich had a nice talk yesterday in a different session about that. The way that what that provides you is dynamic regridding. You have some very large gridded data set. It's dynamically regridded to what you can see on the screen, and that's what goes down to your browser. Secondly, compared to a lot of other tools in Python, these tools are really Python. They're really designed around a Python programmer to stay in Python. They don't require that you know JavaScript, or that you know HTML, or you know CSS. If you do know those things, great. You can make your beautiful tweaks, and it looks really fancy. If you don't, it doesn't matter. You can still use all of them. They're designed that you don't need to use anything but Python. And if you're using anything else, we'll just use Python. Nothing else matters anyway. Another thing is that the tools are all designed to support both Jupyter notebooks, which you probably have heard about several different times. I've seen a lot of mention of those here at the conference, but also a deployed server. So if you need to show something to the public, show something to your boss or to another agency or decision maker, you can set up something that doesn't show any Python. It's a beautiful looking dashboard. It just really focuses on your data and how to interact with it. Next point is a lot of the Python Viz tools were not designed for multi-dimensional arrays. They were not designed for raster data, satellite imagery, or any of the other types of things that you commonly see in the geosciences. It's because these tools came from a totally different background. Most of the plotting is about statistics, small numbers of observations, plotting points, and so on. These tools take that into account, and in my case, it's because they came from neuroscience, where we have brain imaging data. But brain imaging, geoimaging, kind of the same thing. And then the last bit is that sets these tools apart is where the name HoloViz came from. It's kind of a dorky name, but holo means whole, entire, complete. The whole idea of HoloViz is out of all the things that are in this diagram, each one does a little bit. HoloViz is the only one trying to really integrate in everything and solve your entire process from the first time you see the data to actually deploying something at scale for some policymaker to decide on. Everything in between to try to ease the transitions between each of those stages. You don't have to switch to a different tool. You don't have to take your Python code, delete it, and run some other code. You don't have to translate. You can smoothly go from one step to the other. So I'll do a little bit of talking about the tools themselves, but I assume that this will all just wash over you. Just sort of listen for keywords and see if you see anything interesting. All you really have to remember is holoviz.org, and also some demos. So here I'm just trying to give you an idea of what's out there, why we're doing this, why we think it's important. So the first tool is called Panel. It's very hard to search for because it's a very common word, but basically if you've got a Jupyter notebook already, you can easily add Panel and come up with things like you saw in Rich's talk about XRViz. Those things that were being done in XRViz, anybody can do those in a few lines of code. Not as ambitious as XRViz, but for a particular case, if you have a particular data set, particular analysis, you can very easily make a particular panel. And that's true for just about any plotting library you're using. Our usual examples focus on Bokeh as a plotting library. It has a lot of advantages. Don't need to go into those. Another package is called HBplot. You have data in pandas or in Xarray, and you're used to using .plot. You normally would get a static image from that or something that's fairly limited. If you use .hbplot instead, works with Xarray, Dask, and pandas objects, then you can immediately get an interactive object you can combine with other things, embed it in a dashboard. HBplot, the HB stands for HoloViews. That's what it's built on. HoloViews is designed for what I think applies to many people, which is every time you sit down, it's not a whole brand new thing. You didn't suddenly jump into this field. Normally, in a lot of research workflows, you're consuming large amounts of data, the same types of data. The bits are different. The type of data is the same over time. You're very often performing analyses on the same things over and over, different days, different types, different bits of data. With HoloViews, you can capture the metadata about that data once and then plot it immediately. Normal plotting programs, you say, I'm going to plot something. I get some data, I add some labels, I add some blah, 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 and then get a plot. With HoloViews, you say, my data is in these dimensions, it has these units. Usually you can put that into the X-ray object. And at that point, you never have to say that again. Data shader, that's basically the server-side rendering that I talked about. Rendering data down into pixels. Now, HoloViz is, how do I remember all that junk that's on the rest of the slide? Never going to remember that. Go to holoviz.org. It explains everything. In particular, there's a 4-hour tutorial that I gave last week. SciPy. It's recorded. It's on YouTube. And all the materials are at holoviz.org. So to make it very concrete, this is an example of using holoviz. This is the entire code to get the plot on the bottom. So this is one cell of the Jupyter notebook, and then the output from that cell. So at the top, you can see that I'm using X-array, I'm using Dask, using HVplot. And what do? Is we open an X-array. This happens to be world population data. It's a raster. And then I do a tiny bit of cleanup that sets the transparent pixels. Then I use, and I do a plot, which is take this this X-array data array, and tell it that it should be plotted and it should use data shader, this color map, a couple of other options and so on. And next thing I do is to read an entirely different set of data. This is columnar data. The first one is raster data. The second one is columnar data. This is the location of 2 million earthquakes over the past few years, USGS data. And I do a scatter plot of that. Because that's 2 million points, if you did a scatter plot in a web browser, your web browser would crash. But I told it to turn on data shade. And what that does is it aggregates the data on the server and then passes the resulting image down to the browser. And I overlay those two items and get this plot. The red ones are locations of earthquakes. The blue ones show where people live. I think we're around here somewhere, so you should be worried. This is not a static plot though. When you just like in Rich's case, if you zoom in, for instance, if you zoom in on our area, you'll get the same data re-rendered at the new resolution, showing you very detailed data over whatever region you're looking at. And all of this happens automatically. This is all the sort of thing that everyone needs to do. Everyone has data too big for what they're currently looking at. Everyone has the need to compare data sets and so on. And it's all designed to make that be easy. So the rest of these things, so that's the end of the talk. The rest of these things are just live demos that may or may not work. Let's see. Okay, well, some of them will work because they're just pointing you to the websites. So first thing, pyviz.org. I guess if you remember nothing, that's enough. Python Viz. This includes things like showing every Python visual viz tool that there is in different categories, including my favorite category or most important category, dormant projects, i.e. don't use these. That's super important to know. It's very hard to tell when you visit a site whether it's dormant or not. But these things that are in this list, if nobody's contributed to them in 2 years, or the author says, don't use that library. So anyway, you can click on all of them. These are all linked in. You can see how they're organized by popularity. You can see that matplotlib is by far the most popular Python plotting library, and so on. Okay, so, and pyviz.org has things like overviews that show, including an article I wrote here that's a survey of all the different libraries available and other people's overviews. PyViz is contributed, has at least 30 different maintainers who are from all different Viz library authors. We don't agree on anything. but we agree that PyViz is neutral. Meanwhile, there's holoviz.org. Holoviz, primarily, the most important thing it has is tutorial. This is really steps by step, assuming you know basic Python plus using a Jupyter notebook. If you don't know that, go find some tutorial for that first, and then go to the Holoviz tutorial. Everything, it'll step you through everything else after that, including working with very large data. All of the examples are geo examples. Just it speaks to people. They can immediately see what's going on instead of data in some abstract space. Next, you can look at GeoViews. The Holoviz tutorial actually doesn't use GeoViews. We have GeoData and its general purpose tools, and we've just projected it ahead of time to make it all work out nicely. In the real world, where you're working with data from lots of different sources, you're going to need to project and reproject and resample and do all sorts of things. GeoViews has tons of tools for that. GeoViews is what handles the more unusual projections. GeoViews will give you this is an example of just working with multidimensional data. This particular example, you get a time axis here because GeoViews was told to map latitude and longitude onto the spatial axes, and I guess surface temperature onto the color axis. But then there was a fourth axis of time. GeoViews and Holoviz will automatically pop up a little slider that says, you didn't tell me what to do with time, so it's up to you. So it's going to very easily allow you to say, you have a very large multidimensional data set, you can choose what you want to show, and then everything else you get a slider from. Of course, they all support hovering and interaction. So. All right, so I opened all these demos earlier, they're probably all dead. All right, so this first demo is, all of these demos, by the way, if you're fast enough to catch the URL, these are all public demos. They're running on the cloud, not special to this conference. They're just things that we leave around as examples for people. This particular one is 50 lines of Python code. That 50 lines of code lets you control various things about how things appear. You can decide whether you want to map tiles in the background or not, whether you want to show the data. You have a selection of different sets of map tiles, things that Esri, other providers. Decide whether you want to make each individual data point show up or see the overall distribution. So basically, every one of these is controlled by a couple of little lines of Python code. Ties that particular operation to this particular widget. So it's actually a fun little file to read because it's very dense. This whole set of functionality is all in 50 lines. Moreover, if you this will demonstrate the server-side rendering. So if I zoom in where we are. Box select. Yep, there we go. Basically, this is sitting in a container, and when I visit the page, it'll launch up the new process for me. And I can interact with it, and if I don't do anything for a while, it will get stale. It starts over when I visit it again. So that'll be reloading now. This is all, it wouldn't get stale if this were my own system or my own cloud. This is the public facing thing for people. So I'll come back to that one. This is an example with a bunch, with 200,000 locations of glaciers in the world. They're plotted on a map here. They're plotted by latitude and elevation. If I select one of them, this basically does cross-filtering. Select any of them on the map, you can see which ones are selected. try to understand which ones have which temperature and which precipitation. Trying to understand, like, we only care about the particular spatial locations. You can see that the ones in that spatial location have a certain differences in temperature and so on. All right, this is loaded again. Okay, so as you zoom in, you'll see this particular one is census data. This is basically one dot for everyone in America as of 2010. And if I zoom in, you'll see the map background updates, and you'll also see the data updates. The data never comes to my web browser. It'd be too big for the web browser. 300 billion points or so. It's sitting on the remote server somewhere in the cloud in Amazon. Whenever I zoom in, where we are now, you'll see a lag, and then you see data update, right? That's the server side rendering right there. So you can, essentially what that allows you to do is just dump all of your data to these tools to say, hey, I don't have to worry about it or think about it. I'm going to see all my data. And if you're zoomed out, you'll see all of your data rendered faithfully. See the little lag. And then anything you want to explore, you just zoom in, and you get the data, and at no point has the data ever been transferred. So that's this. In this case, this is points. This can be any type of data. It can be raster data, trajectories, meshes, tri-meshes, and such. And that's what's illustrated in some of these other cases. Here's an example with tri-mesh data. This is from our work with the Army Corps of Engineers. That allows variable resolution for metrology modeling. If you keep zooming in, if we were still running, it would be updating. This is trajectory data from a bunch of flights. Let's see if this is still running. So I'll reload this one. That's showing Landsat data. I'll come back to that. Just run it. Again, this is sitting somewhere in the cloud and running when I visit the page. Back to that one, and I'll point you to type EarthML. This is an offshoot of our work. This is specific to our work with NASA. You can look on there and see you can see example of visualizing LiDAR in this very region. Examples of using spectral clustering on Landsat data. Nice heat and trees example, understanding urban data. Visualizing carbon flux across. So these are basically topic areas that you guys know more about than I do, but jazzed up with our tools. It's a sister site called EarthSim. EarthML is for machine learning applications of the HoloViz tools. EarthSim is for simulation applications, currently specifically hydrology simulations. And this is EarthML is joint work with NASA. EarthSim is joint work with the Army Corps of Engineers Engineering Research and Development Center. So in the EarthSim examples, you can see things like there are a lot of examples of using tri-mesh data. You can use the interactive tools to, in this case, these were interactively drawn by the user to different lines, and they're basically cutting across. And you can plot the first line here corresponds to one of these line plots. The second one is another, so you can interactively collect data and explore it very easily. Okay, I think that's covering everything. Essentially, take one thing away, holoviz.org. Thank you.
which I'm really enjoying having some cool technical visualization talks in the morning. So I really appreciate that. All right, our last plenary speaker this morning is Dr. Kelsey Jordahl, and he is the director of the data pipeline team at Planet, which most of you know operates the largest private constellation of satellites in the world, including over 150 Earth-observing satellites. Kelsey is also an active member of the Python community. He's a past conference chair of SciPy and was the original author of the GeoPandas library. Kelsey holds a PhD from the joint MIT-Hui Oceanography program, where his advisor was the famed Marcia McNutt, who, as we know, is now running the National Academy of Sciences, but was also a previous AGU president and the director of the USGS. In his spare time, Kelsey is a volunteer mountaineering instructor with the Spokane Mountaineers, which I've taken a course from, so that was exciting to hear. And let's welcome Kelsey. Oh, actually.
Okay, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. This is my first introduction to this community. I know a few of you from other contexts, but it's nice to have all these discussions this week and see everything people are working on here. So I am excited to talk a little bit about Planet's data here and some applications and general use cases and interoperability. So that's the general outline of what I'm going to talk about. Just a general introduction to our satellites and our data. A little bit about the scale that we work at and my team in particular and how we handle all the data. And then I'll follow up with some examples that are relevant to this audience of scientific applications, a few other applications of our data, and then a little bit about how our data fits into the broader ecosystem, how to use it in the cloud and other contexts, and then you might be interested in following up with Glenn. Let me just start with the general introduction for myself and my team. And he said I'm the director of the data pipeline team at Planet. So we are the team that handles all of the data from the time that it is downlinked from the satellites. So it gets to a ground station. We process it in the cloud, publish it, get it ready for publication, and also handle all the processing to various products that are going to be delivered to customers. So every image that comes in, we do the initial processing and also the on-demand and later processing to various products. So we're doing all the work behind the scenes, not handling the public data API or the things in space, but we handle that. So a little bit about our data sources. We handle 3 different types of satellites. One that is the largest number of total satellites, and which most of you are probably most familiar with, are the PlanetScope instruments, the Dove satellites. So well over 120 satellites in orbit now. It is the largest private constellation of satellites in the world. We operate all these satellites in real-time automated fashion. So managing this is a relatively small team of engineers who handle all this. The other 2 constellations, RapidEye and SkySat, I won't focus on as much in this talk, but I'll give you a brief introduction. RapidEye has been around since 2009, and it was operated by a company that was acquired by Planet later. We still operate the 5 satellites in the Rapid Eye fleet, and they provide important data continuity to those satellites. Right now, it's a small fraction of our total area that we image. And then we have the higher resolution satellites, the SkySat. I'll talk very briefly about these as well, but ground resolution is about 70 centimeters compared to the 4 meters. So the Dove satellites, these are CubeSats. You may have heard talked about. Other people have mentioned these in other talks. But CubeSat comes in a size factor that's in scales of units of 10 by 10 by 10 centimeters. That's a 1 unit CubeSat. Our satellites are 3U, so it's 3 units, 30 centimeters by 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters. When it's folded up, these are deployable solar panels you see out of the sides, and deployable cover on the telescope with an antenna out the front. But otherwise, inside is basically optics, a telescope, electronics, and sensors. Normal operating altitude is around 500 kilometers, depends on the specific orbit, but they're all the production satellites are in sun-synchronous orbits, so we get flights over a given location on the Earth at the same time of day. Roughly, all of these are imaging in 3 visual bands, red, green, blue, and IR bands. Over time at Planet, we've designed, built, and had launched it's around 250 total satellites now. Iterate over the design and always have the latest versions being launched now. And we have, on average, 2 to 3 launches a year where we get space on various launch providers that get our satellites into space. So this is a much shorter lead time than most other satellite design systems. So we can get a design from the drawing board to a tech demo to production in 6 months to a year, compared to many years lead time for other satellites. A little bit about the scale of the data that these doves are bringing down. So this is a graph of square kilometers per day that have been imaged by the Dove satellites. So starting in 2016, when we started launching larger groups of satellites at scale, we had tech demos that we had launched from the International Space Station and other places before that. But the production fleet of satellites really started ramping up in 2016, and especially our first really large launch was really 2017 with the, see on the graph, it's Flock 3P, was 88 satellites launched on a PSLV rocket out of India. That was, at the time, the largest number of satellites that had been launched in any one rocket. I believe it still is. There's some competition for that number nowadays, but we're still up there. 88 of those were ours, were our Doves deployed there. That's what really brought us to full global daily coverage in 2017. You can see it took a while to ramp up that coverage as those satellites were phased into orbit. One thing about operating the Doves, they don't have any propulsion. Right? So how do we control where they are? We have attitude control. And we launch 88 of them into the same orbit. So how do you distribute them through that orbit so that they're not all imaging the same place at the same time? That's an interesting technique that we use, which is differential drag from the very tenuous upper atmosphere that we can the satellites into higher and lower drag configurations by the rotational solar panels. So we use that differential drag to phase out the satellites through the whole orbit. It's a period that takes a few months for the orbit that we're operating at, but this well spread out coverage. Satellites are inexpensive because we don't have any propulsion. Operationally, we're very confident. Anyway, I'm on the data pipeline side, so here what's relevant to my team is how much data is coming in. So here you see the average coverage per day is about 300 million square kilometers. Depending on how you count it, 75 to 80% of the surface of the Earth every day. We're bringing down over 1 million images, scenes from the satellites per day, and that's roughly 6 terabytes a day. So our whole catalog is on the order of 5 petabytes or so just for the raw data. Obviously, all the ancillary processing and for the processing, different product levels are additional to that. But that's roughly the scale that we're working in now. So that's the Dove constellation. Very briefly about the other 2 types of satellites we operate. I mentioned the Rapid Eye satellites. They're around 6-meter resolution. This is a task system. They were very low-cost satellites at the time, but still quite a bit larger than the Dove satellites, and have very similar use cases to the Doves. So we use it to augment the data set for PlanetScope Doves, and also for the data archive back to 2009, 2010. These are already operating past the end of their planned lifetime, so their future lifespan is limited, but they're still an important part of our data catalog. Then we have the SkySat satellites, which are higher resolution. These were designed and built by a company called Skybox. It was later acquired by Google. It was later acquired by Planet. So now we operate the 14 SkySat satellites that are in orbit. They're able to map at 70 to 80 centimeter resolution, depending on the geometry of the view. And this is also a task system, so on average we're collecting about 500,000 square kilometers per day. With SkySats, we pick and choose what the targets are. So we can choose those targets dynamically, and we're imaging different things every day with this system. So I won't talk as much about what we're doing with SkySat if you're interested in higher resolution satellite data. So this is just generally about our platform and processing. So we'll talk about this in much detail, but some of the processing that we do internally to build different products for delivery to customers, and also to process imagery for production of global mosaics and regional focus mosaics, and then delivering all of those to customers through the API, which I'll talk about. Here's an example of one of our monthly mosaics. So I mentioned we get over 1 million images a day, so say 30 to 40 million images per month over the surface of the Earth. Building a composite image of that. We do this regularly on a monthly scale. That's a good scale to get nearly cloud-free imagery just about everywhere on Earth. So input 30 to 40 million scenes to select from. We choose a few million of those, highest quality, most cloud-free, and composite them to build the best view of the Earth for that. This snapshot happens to be from March of this year. Okay, so next topic I wanted to talk a little bit about is some applications of planet data. For this audience, I wanted to focus mostly on earth science applications, things that have been done with our data. I've already heard a couple talks. People have mentioned uses of Planet Dove data for different applications, for snow detection, for phenology. So it was nice to see those. I'm going to talk about a few different examples. One large project we have now is in cooperation with the Paul Allen Foundation and a large group of researchers working on this to map coral reef structure, habitats, and so on. This is one paper that's published out of this project out of Greg Axelberg's lab at the University, Arizona State University. It was recently published. This was a project to categorize the different habitats in coral reefs. So this is part of a larger project to map and characterize and view change in all the coral reefs around the nations. Another application I'll mention, it utilizes some particular aspects of the orbits of our satellites. This is interesting. This is monitoring river flows at high latitudes. So the geometry of our orbits is such that they tend to converge at higher latitudes. So there's less overlap with the swaths at the equator, more overlap with the swaths as you go higher towards the poles. So if you look at high enough latitudes, there are places where every day there will be overlaps between the swaths. And this is exploiting the intraday views. You get multiple images in the same day of the same location. And because of the geometries of the orbit, these are typically minutes apart. And this is a group led by Andy Cobb at the University of Oslo in Norway that exploited that to monitor flows of rafted ice in rivers. And by looking at those images that are seconds to minutes apart, they got velocity vectors for flow through these rivers. So it's quite the temporal aspect of that data. So the bottom graph is a velocity flow chart. This river, and this is a snapshot. This is for one particular 2-minute interval. Another example, also at high latitudes, but in terms of longer term monitoring, because we're sampling nearly every day, you can monitor the water, the surface water changes throughout a season at high latitudes, where after snow melt, there are more water features, ponds, that form, later dry up, and watching how those change through the season. This is research by Sarah Cooley at Brown University with colleagues. It was recently published in JRL, monitoring those water features at high latitudes. So these are seasonal changes, mapping out how much particular water changes throughout one summer season in the Arctic, various locations. All right, another citation. Now this one isn't from the published literature, but from science Twitter. So this is real-time earthquake science that was done and shared on Twitter from various sources. So the tweet on the left from Chris Milner is derived from planet optical data from stereographic comparisons of before and after images from Planet Dove satellites that calculated the displacement of the Ridgecrest earthquake. And this was published within a couple days after the event itself, because we had before and after imagery that was published. The one on the right came a couple days later, and this is from INSAR radar data that has much higher precision, but it came from the ALOS-2 satellite. Sentinel-1 also imaged this, but that came a few days after this as well, before they had goods that could be used. Now, these two are broadly comparable, but they're actually almost orthogonal displacement that it's showing. So the optical image is sensitive to the north-south motion primarily. The INSAR image is primarily east-west. So combining these, you can get a 3D picture. So this is just a nice little example. But the real advantage of the optical imagery here is it's going to be available generally quicker than. And then just a few quick examples of images that don't have specific analyses attached to them, but here is just an image of sea ice in Antarctica, Robertson Island. So monitoring the cryosphere and changes on a daily scale, something that we're conservation particularly good at. Monitoring events, dynamic events that are happening, volcanic eruptions, and flooding events, other natural disasters. So this is the Missouri River in Iowa in the spring, and before and after images of the flood. All right, so the time I've got left, I want to talk a little bit about interoperability and how to use planet data. So we have various data in our system and that our users are using in their own systems. So we publish in our own API Landsat 8, Sentinel-2 data that can be used with the same API and points to public versions of those data can be used in conjunction. One thing that Planet also operates is the public bucket ingestion of the Landsat 8 dataset to AWS S3. So we have been involved in that public aspect of that dataset for a long time. Talk a little bit about just the fact that everything we do is in the cloud. All of our processing is on the cloud internally. When we serve up things to the API, that's coming from a cloud provider as well. And there's been a lot of talk at this meeting that I've heard about cloud optimized processes and how to use that data in a way that's efficient, scalable, can be streamed out. And so everything we do is inherent. All our imagery data is inherently cloud optimized GeoTIFFs that can be used efficiently. When you get a link to one of our GeoTIFFs, you can just point GDAL or whatever your service is at it, and it will know how to bring out the chunks that you have and use those. So, talk briefly about delivering things to the cloud, we also have another API that can push data into your own cloud bucket. So if you've got an S3 bucket, a GCS bucket, or an Azure store that you want to push your data to, we've got an API that can do some simple operations, clipping, compositing, bandmath, grid projection, tiling, and push the results into your own cloud. And then lastly, I'll talk about radiometric interoperability briefly. This was an analysis that was done by GDA in conjunction with the NGA for the US government, comparing PlanetScope band precision to Landsat 8, and showed that the correlation was very high, and essentially no additional correction needed to be applied to the data to make it comparable with Landsat 8. Okay, so I want to wrap up with how do you use Planet data? How do you get a hold of Planet data if you don't already have it? Well, first of all, we are a commercial company, so new and existing contracts. So if you have a contract, your organization has a contract, you may already have access to Planet data in some way. We're working with a lot of NASA researchers and others on particular things. I'm happy to talk to you about applications if you have them. But more broadly, we have an education and research program that provides free access to data for nonprofit educational uses. And here's an application, there's a link to the application form. Get a hold of that. And then for commercial users and others, have a 14-day free trial. So lastly, I'll plug two upcoming events. One is August in Menlo Park. This is the Analysis Ready Data Workshop. This is something the Planet is organizing along with industry partners, Maxar, and USGS is hosting, NASA, Copernicus are participating, and then we're having our first Planet-only user and developer conference this fall in San Francisco. All right, thanks. And we happy to take any questions.
Yes, Bob Jones from CDAC. Just wondering the implications of your work in other companies for the proliferation of objects in space.
Yep, that's a good question. So Planet is very conscious of that issue and the sustainability of objects in low Earth orbit. So everything that we launch is designed to have a lifespan no more than 20 years, so that it will re-enter passively within 20 years, typically much less than that. So 5 to 10 years is the lifespan.
Kelsey, I seem to remember that some release, some statement that if you were using Planet data in California, it was all free or something like that. Is that still true?
It is not completely true. We had an Open Data California program for several years. That is winding down now, so I'm not sure. I think we're not taking new applications for that. Any data that was part of that program the license is continued, and if you're already a part of it, I think there's some period of time that it's going to. It's not going to be true in the future.
Okay, but there is a mechanism to post to get sort of free credits for
Yes,
research.
for research and nonprofit uses.
Kelsey, thanks. Are you able to say anything about Planet's future plan. So you've got a big constellation up there right now. Anything about kind of what's next?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk very broadly about that. That obviously we have continued to innovate as a company and with our spacecraft. So looking into the future, we are certainly looking. We have certain coverage now, and our focus was on daily coverage in 4 bands, and certainly in the future, we are looking at expanding our resolution, increasing our resolution in time, in space, and temporal. Right. So I'll say all 3 of those axes we expect to be able to improve on in the future. Right.
Yeah. Got one question. With those repeat images, especially high up in the Arctic, is anyone attempting kind of structure from motion sort of terrain with that? I mean, it seems that was obvious.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yes, there's been at least one published study about stereo reconstruction with planet imagery. But it's certainly an interesting application, and I know there are NASA researchers, NASA grantees working with reconstruction from our imagery along these lines. So yeah, it definitely is an interesting field.
All right. If there's nothing else, I'll just say it from here. I'd like to thank both of our presenters and all of our Lightning Talk presenters. I thought this was a fantastic session of like applied work, and I'm really happy that both Jim and Kelsey, this was their first ESIP meeting, and that they were here, and I hope that you all find time to chat with them during the rest of the day. And with that, please enjoy your break and the rest of the sessions today.